Hello. Wanted to talk through a couple of the details of my Di2 build on a Bearclaw Thunderhawk for those who might be interested. So this frame is normally fitted with SRAM, usually they're wireless options. So, I wasn't exactly sure how Di2 wiring would go, and there are a couple of just little details that are worth keeping in mind, although, as you can see, I did get everything successfully routed, so it is possible. That's the short answer. Why go with Shimano instead of SRAM? If this is definitely a bike that's been designed with SRAM in mind, there aren't really a lot of good reasons. So definitely go with SRAM if you're comfortable with SRAM. My biggest thought was I didn't like dot fluid. I kind of prefer mineral oil, just from a disposal environmental standpoint. So, the details you should be kind of thinking about is the biggest one is about where you're going to place the Junction B box. So I placed the Junction B box in the down tube eventually because it is the only place that it can actually fit on my frame, although I was planning on putting it into the seat tube. So the reason for that, if you can get in here, is because you have these two holes. The hole for the seat tube is smaller than the hole for the down tube, and only the down tube is a large enough diameter to actually fit the Junction B box in there. So the biggest challenge was just getting the B box fitted and situated somewhere. When you do get it in, you're going to bend the wires more than you're comfortable with, and is probably more than is recommended just in placing it to get the wiring in here. And I definitely scratched up the corners of the box because it is the tightest of fits to get this through in this bottom bracket. So I swapped around a couple of the wires, but luckily all of the wiring lengths that I bought ended up still working out. So for reference, I ended up with, this is a 600 millimeter wire running from here to about here-ish somewhere where the Junction B box is. And then I have a 350 millimeter wire running to the front derailleur. And basically these two wires are the limiting lengths in my setup as I've got 1 meter cables for the seat tube to the battery and for the rear derailleur wire. Those are both 1 meter. And I have enough slack and play in those two, but I kind of am limited with where, I have to make sure that I can get the derailleur here and then still have enough slack here so that when I connect up my front, handlebars, that'll work out. And for here, I've just got another 350 millimeter wire, and then I've got their long Y junction. So it's like 520 mils or something like that on each side of the 50 millimeter extra third direction. And I'm using the wireless unit as the connector that will actually connect these two in the end. The other thing is, if you're worried about chafe and things, you cannot use the Ultegra grommets for Di2 that kind of Shimano makes. They don't fit into their ports that Bearclaw uses. The ports are too small, so I'll need to have a different grommet system to kind of protect these wires. I'm using the Shimano cranks, so there's going to be a 24 millimeter spindle, and there would be plenty of room, outside of the sleeve to run wires in this bottom bracket, but you do not have to, right? They have the seat tube and the down tube meet in a weld outside of this bottom bracket, and so there's actually room outside the bottom bracket where you can run a wire sort of through like this. So the wiring to the battery runs and entirely avoids the bottom bracket, which is great if you're considering a 30 millimeter spindle. I've chosen right now to wire out and below the bottom bracket with the front and rear derailleur cables, but I am thinking I might change my mind and instead rewire this so that it runs up through this and then over the top, flipping around, and then it would run, so it would run on the inside of the yoke and then over the top of the bottom bracket instead, and then maybe I could use a zip tie or something to make sure that it stays tight against the seat tube, and so it doesn't pop out in against the chain rings. But maybe that would be more protection than running them underneath. As far as protecting them while they are underneath, there's two options, right? You could sort of use a cable guide that's intended for mechanical cables that could fit here onto the bottom bracket shell, or the other option is to use the Shimano electric wire covers. So they have these sort of small covers that you could place on, and that would provide some modicum of protection as well as ensuring the cables stay in the right place.